So the author that I studied for this author study was A. Milne. He is a British author, and he is most famously known for writing The House at Pooh Corner and Winnie the Pooh. A little bit about Milne. He was born in 1882. His father was the headmaster of a private school named Henley House. Milne went to Westminster School as well as the University of Cambridge's Trinity College, where he actually studied mathematics. It wasn't until he started writing and editing the magazine for his school, the Granta, that he found he really did have a passion for writing and wanted to be a journalist and an author. Um, he moved to London after he graduated, which was in the year 1903, and he started writing for a literary magazine called The Punch. He wrote essays and poetry and kind of humorous short stories that were published in the magazine up until 1914. In 1915, he enlisted in the war. Now, in his autobiography as well as the biography, he was mentioned, and it was highly praised that he was a pacifist. However, he did believe this was a very noble cause, and so he did enlist in the war in 1915. He was discharged in 1919, so he served 4 years in the Royal Warwickshire Regiment. And he also worked in something called the Royal Corps of Signals. After he was discharged from the military in 1919, he and his wife, Dorothy, moved to London. He married Dorothy in 1913, 2 years before he enlisted. And they had a son in 1920, and his son's name was Christopher Robin. Now, this is the child that is obviously I've lost my word that I was looking for. He is kind of the inspiration for the character Christopher Robin in the books, and this character was based off of their son. It is important to mention that during his service in the war, A. Milne wrote a lot of plays that were later published. He wrote some kind of one-act comedy farces, a lot of other comedies. He wrote some stage adaptations of children's books during his time in the war, and he also continued to do that after the war up until about the 1930s. He wrote books starting in 1925 that used his son and his son's adventures and conversations and activities as inspirations, including Buckingham Palace, Halfway Down. Those were poems. Also, Now We Are Six. Then in 1926, he wrote Winnie the Pooh, and in 1928, he wrote The House at Pooh Corner. These followed Christopher Robin and his son, and these animal playmates, which were actually inspired by Christopher Robin's stuffed animals. It centered around Winnie the Pooh, while having lots of other characters like Tigger, Eeyore, Owl, Kanga, Rabbit, Piglet, things like that. He created this fantasy world of Hundred Acre Wood. The Winnie the Pooh books and the House at Pooh Corner were illustrated by Ernest H. Shepard. And these were by far some of the most well-known works from Milne and Shepard as well. After working with his Winnie the Pooh books, he decided he was done doing that. He had kind of sheltered his son from the Winnie the Pooh stories because he didn't want that fame and obsession coming to his son. So, interesting fact, he never actually read any of his Winnie the Pooh works to his son. Instead, he read him different short stories and children's stories and poems from some of his favorite writers. So that was kind of a fun fact to learn about him. He stopped writing Winnie the Pooh with The House at Pooh Corner. That was his final book there. And in the 30s and 40s, he returned to writing for adults instead of kids. He wrote short stories. He even wrote a nonfiction piece about war. And he also wrote his autobiography during that time. He passed away in 1956. He had been suffering from illnesses in the 1950s, had surgery, kind of left him debilitated, and so he passed away in his home in 1956. I'm going to read part of a chapter of The House at Pooh Corner, and then I'm going to discuss an activity that would be fun to do after reading some of this. Chapter 1, in which a house is built at Pooh Corner for Eeyore. And I like that all of his chapters start with in which. It's kind of fun. It just kind of gives you an idea of what's going on. One day when Pooh Bear had nothing else to do, he thought he would do something. So he went round to Piglet's house to see what Piglet was doing. It was still snowing as he stumped over the white forest track, and he expected to find Piglet warming his toes in front of his fire. But to his surprise, he saw that the door was open, and the more he looked inside, the more Piglet wasn't there. "He's out," said Pooh sadly. "That's what it is. He's not in. I shall have to go a fast-thinking walk by myself. Bother!" But first he thought he would knock very loudly, just to make quite sure. And while he waited for Piglet not to answer, he jumped up and down to keep warm. And a hum came suddenly into his head, which seemed to him a good hum, such as it hummed hopefully to others. "The more it snows, tiddly-pom, the more it goes, tiddly-pom. The more it goes, tiddly-pom, on snowing. And nobody knows, tiddly-pom, how cold my toes, tiddly-pom, how cold my toes, tiddly-pom, are growing." "So what I'll do," said Pooh, "is I'll do this. I'll just go home first and see what the time is, and perhaps I'll put a muffler round my neck, and then I'll go and see Eeyore and sing it to him." He hurried back to his own house, and his mind was so busy on the way with the hum that he was getting ready for Eeyore, when he suddenly saw Piglet sitting in his best armchair, and he could only stand there rubbing his head and wondering whose house he was in. "Hello, Piglet," he said. "I thought you were out." "No," said Piglet. "It's you who were out, Pooh." "So it was," said Pooh. "I knew one of us was." He looked up at his clock, which had stopped 5 minutes to 11 some weeks ago. "Nearly 11 o'clock," said Pooh happily. "You're just in time for a little smackerel of something." And he put his head into the cupboard. "And then we'll go out, Piglet, and sing my song to Eeyore." "Which song, Pooh?" "The one we're going to sing to Eeyore," explained Pooh. The clock was still saying 5 minutes to 11 when Pooh and Piglet set out on their way half an hour later. The wind had dropped, and the snow, tired of rushing round in circles trying to catch itself up, now fluttered gently down until it found a place on which to rest. And sometimes the place was Pooh's nose, and sometimes it wasn't. And in a little while Piglet was wearing a white muffler round his neck and feeling more snowy behind the ears than he had ever felt before. "Pooh," he said at last, because he didn't want Pooh to think he was giving in, "I was just wondering, how would it be if we went home now and practiced your song, and then sang it to Eeyore tomorrow, or the next day, when we happen to see him?" "That's a very good idea, Piglet," said Pooh. "We'll practice it now as we go along, but it's no good going home to practice it, because it's a special outdoor song, and it has to be sung in the snow." So that is part of The House at Pooh Corner. I think a fun activity to do with this for younger kids, I would maybe have them create their own character to fit into the 100-Acre Wood, and have them explain a little bit about their character. How would it fit in? You know, you have Piglet that's shy, you have Tigger that's outgoing, Rabbit that's hardworking, Owl that's wise, Eeyore that's gloomy. How would their character fit in? What would it look like? Kind of make a story for that character. For older kids, I would maybe have them write their own small scene in Winnie the Pooh. They can use the characters there. Maybe they want to create their own character as well. But, you know, something that they can create their own scene, kind of staying with the flow of Winnie the Pooh. See if they can't find that A.A. Milne style, and kind of go along with it. So I think that would be fun to do from elementary school through middle school. And that is my activity and my author. Thank you.